Canadians is spelled wrong. So that's weird. Home equity tax. Yes, they want to tax your house and they want to tax the water. And so that's not surprising whatsoever if you've been paying attention. And holy cow, there's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We have to start with Daily Romania, because Daily Romania is taking the piss out of the Euro Cup. And it's interesting. They say Romania's first opponent in the round of 16 will be Sudan. I mean, the Netherlands. And they've got the picture of the Netherlands team up. And so Romania's poking fun at like, haha, you let your country get invaded. And so that's, I mean, interesting, right? Like we're at that stage of invasion now. And I'm yes, says LMAO. Dr. Eli David says climate change is real. Canada 1984. So this is the Canadian, I'm assuming, soccer team in 1984, football team, if you will. And Canada 2024 looks real different. It's a very different team, very different makeup of the team. So that's an interesting thing to notice, right? And people just hate noticing. Oh man, you're noticing again. Not noticing. We got to stop the noticing. So we have to start talking about the UK. We have to start talking about the UK because Nigel Farage had momentum going into this. He had a whole bunch of backing. He had lots and lots of people who were enthusiastic and excited about his offering. And so Reform really, really had a great showing prior to the election. Here's one of the things that Nigel Farage says. And Randy says, sounds exactly like something Maxime Bernier would say. It's exactly the same thing as what Maxime Bernier says. But here's Nigel Farage talking just ahead of the UK election that just happened. And he was elected. He's now an MP. So here we go.
The other day, what was I going to do for the black community? Do you know what I said? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I couldn't give a damn whether you're black or white, whether you're gay or straight. I really don't care. You'll be judged by your character. You'll be judged by your ability. You'll be judged by, are you a contributor to society or a taker out? And right at the moment, this is considered to be dangerous, radical thinking. But I think if we can start to explain why this matters, if we can start to explain that that's the only way we're going to have any chance of a unified society that works together, with mutual benefit for each other, I think this is one of the next great political battles. And we're going to need some quite brave leaders.
Right. So what are you going to do for black British people? Nothing. I'm not going to do anything for black British people. I'm not going to do anything for Muslim British people or Sikh British people or anything else. No, I will not call in the Canadian military to pick up non-Canadian Sikhs in Afghanistan. It's just inappropriate. But, right, that's how it works. But Maxime Bernier said in 2019, what will you do for the Muslim community? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I won't do anything for the Muslim community, for the Jewish community, or for the Christian community. I'll do everything for you as a Canadian. This is the same thing, same messaging that Nigel Farage is using. And he won a seat. So that's interesting. Farage's Farage's Reform Party has been able to crack into the House of Commons where Maxime Bernier's party has not been able to do that. And that's interesting to note, right? Lee says, but the rhetoric is similar, right? The messaging is similar. And that's interesting to note to me as well, because they are very similar, regardless of whether people want to believe it or not. Lee says, you're welcome to come from anywhere in the world, from any religion. If you share our values, we can live together happily and in peace. Nigel Farage nails it. Right. I'll just show the first. This is 2.5 minutes. I won't show all of it because we have 100 odd tabs today. So, but fundamentally, that's the same messaging as well that Maxime Bernier says. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you come from. What matters is that you ascribe to being Canadian, unity in Canadian values of freedom, personal responsibility, so on and so on and so on. And I think that that's within the context of having to appeal to a broad electorate. I think that that's a smart position to take. Does that make sense? there are different positions that would potentially work as well. They're very nationalistic, but it would still work. But I think that it's interesting that focusing on a united country, focusing on similarities, and focusing on the ability to have personal responsibility and freedom, and so on and so forth. And those things require work from you. It's like if you want to learn French, you can't just not do anything and learn French, right? If you want to have a country where you're allowed to be free and allowed to engage in business and allowed to engage in all of these things, you can't just sit back and not participate. You have to make sure that those things remain true. Obviously, I think after going through 2020 to now, it is more pointedly obvious to me. Lee, well, here's just a bit of this Nigel Farage clip.
We've all got friends that have come here from all over the world. We're a very welcoming country. We just can't take million upon million upon million. It does not work. And those sheer numbers have led in some parts of the country, and I'm thinking perhaps in the northwest, of Blackburn, of Burnley. We could cross the Pennines and go to Leeds or Bradford. And you saw what I saw in the local elections this year. For the first time in our lives in England, people voting on sectarian lines, people voting purely on religious lines.
So religious bloc voting leads to majority, and we're told democracy is the gold standard, but it's not. Democracy is just the tyranny of the majority, right? And so just because 9 of us all voted that you're going to give us your work and labor, and we're all just going to sit around, but we all voted for it, and we all agree. That's not a system that's free. That system is very tyrannical, which is why the United States is a republic. So this whole idea of voting along religious lines, voting in Sharia law, having policies that prioritize bringing people in from Middle Eastern places or whatever, culturally, those people have a lot more children than Brits or Westerners do. And so how long before the culture here in the West is replaced with a culture that sees things very differently? And how long before the politics starts reflecting that? It's already reflecting that. Doug Ford's doing Eid announcements now, and that's wild. Nigel Farage says the revolt against the establishment is underway. This is just before the election is called. The early returns were coming in, and this is what he said.
It's midnight. There are 2 results in from the northeast of England that put Reform on 30% of the vote. That is way more than any possible prediction or projection. It's almost unbelievable. What does it mean? It means we're going to win seats, many, many seats, I think, right now across the country. But to watch the TV coverage, it's almost comical. There's not a single representative on there from Reform UK. Mainstream media are in denial just as much as our political parties. This is going to be 6 million votes plus. This, folks, is huge.
Interesting, right? And so here is Majid, and he says, Reform Party has come second in the 2 seats officially declared so far. So Labour got 49%, Reform got 26% in the second one, Labour 47%, Reform 29%. And third officially declared seat with Reform Party UK came second. As the night would go on, more seats like that would happen, 98 seats in total. Does that sound like normal, above board to you, right? In all of those seats, and they only win 4? If you look for information on Hammer and Scorecard now, however, you get a whole bunch of Snopes debunking and Hammer and Scorecard don't exist, et cetera, et cetera. But I did find Joe Nova, and this is a collection of clips that are now mostly private that show what Hammer and Scorecard is. And it says Hammer and Scorecard are the CIA programs designed to interfere in foreign elections being used in the US now. Imagine the CIA had been using software for years that could undetectably alter vote counts in electronic transit between ballot centers and center vote collection sites. How inevitable is it that sooner or later the same program would be used within the USA? There's a karma to this. Okay, so Hammer and Scorecard are the names of 2 programs designed by the CIA to interfere in foreign elections and now allegedly have been used in the United States itself. General McInerney described Hammer and Scorecard as a pair of programs initially designed for the CIA before being privatized by deep state players from the Obama administration. We explained how they work in an article last week, but the gist is this. Hammer, or the Hammer, is a counterintelligence surveillance program used to spy on activities or on protected networks, like voting machines, without detection, while Scorecard is a vote manipulation application that changes votes during transfer. It's the least detectable form of election manipulation because it works during data transfer between voting stations and data storage hubs. Unless both sides are looking for irregularities, it's impossible to catch. If nefarious forces had people on one side or the other side or both during data transfer, it cannot be exposed. Voting alterations are limited to something like 3% in each move to make it less obvious. CIA program known as Scorecard allows its users to change voting outcomes by hacking into the transfer between the local reporting stations and the state or national data centers, according to McInerney. It's a small amount of under 3% to keep it from triggering any alarms. He would know. He served in top military positions under the Secretary of Defense and the Vice President of the United States. So it's interesting that Hammer and Scorecard are weapons that have been developed by the CIA and privatized by Obama, and were potentially used in the 2020. And I think yes, but you make up your mind. Who knows? I've seen a lot of evidence about this whole 2020 election theft, and I'm convinced that yes, the 2020 election was stolen by bad actors and using software that makes it look like it wasn't stolen. But you have to find out how many votes you need before you can rig it, right? And so that's part of all this. And the other part of the Hammer Scorecard situation as well is keeping I think they can decide how many votes somebody's going to get, right? So Labor wins and Reform gets second. And I think probably all of the Reform results are in the 27 to 29% range. And I think that that's anomalous. Right? I think that that's interesting. If they can change votes in real time, why do they need to have the information at the end of the day, like votes total? If they can change votes in real time, why do they need that information? Well, Donald Trump was an anomaly, who's a very popular president who got a lot of votes. So in order to ensure that they won, they needed to know the number. Previously, it was close enough that 3% could swing an election. And so they didn't need to, they could just kind of figure that they would win. And now they needed a surety. They needed absolute, secure 100%. So I think Hammer and Scorecard have actually evolved since 2020. But I think that our system, and I've said this before 2020 as well, I think they can choose which seat they want. I think they can choose the percentage. I think they have absolute full total control and ownership over our electoral system, being the Canadian UK system, without any real kind of pushback. And I think that that's really, really interesting. But the statistic of Reform coming second in 98 seats, that's anomalous. And like Nenchi's 60-odd thousand votes, all from brand new NDP members, it sticks out to me as something that shouldn't work like that. It doesn't usually work like that. That's an anomaly that looks strange, like our clouds. Here's Tucker Carlson talking with Ken Paxton. So don't take my word for it about these electoral irregularities. Take these guys' word for it, or make up your own mind. Please make up your own mind. Here are these two talking about this to add fuel to the evidence in your mind. Here we go.
Stopped counting votes on election night?
Because what they needed to figure out was how many real votes there were, so they could figure out how many mail-in ballots to apply to the election. That's what they would have done in Texas. I'm convinced.
So you think that was fraud, right?
I have no doubt, having been through that whole process.
It wasn't just a water leak?
It was definitely planned. I mean, it would have happened in Texas. I promise you.
But can you just stop counting ballots on election night when everyone's watching TV? Oh, I know.
Have you ever seen that before? Ever? For 3 hours?
Well, you tell me. You're the one. You're the politics.
I've never seen it before in my life. I was like, I knew it when they stopped, and Trump is leading in all these states. I knew exactly what they were doing. Because there's no way to know where those mail-in ballots came. Anybody could have filled them out. Anybody. There's no way to know where those ballots came from.
That's not a dangerous conspiracy theory?
I watched it happen. I was a part of it.
There you go. So interesting stuff happening, right? Tom says prime ministers who have won higher shares of the vote than Keir Starmer: Johnson, May, Cameron, Blair, Major, Thatcher, Wilson, Heath. So that's interesting, right? So this is a blowout of mediocre proportions, right? That's weird. Jack of the North says a landslide in Wales saw a lower share of the vote in a lower turnout. Labour has 83% of Welsh seats with the support of less than 20% of the electorate. Call this whatever you like, but it's not representative democracy, right? No. Rod is responding to Matthew. Matthew says, astonishingly, Labour under Starmer have won 3 million votes less than Labour won under Jeremy Corbyn in 2017. And yet we have almost 300 more seats than the opposition. Isn't that strange? Jeremy Corbyn didn't form government in 2017, but nobody went out to vote, I guess. Nobody was interested in this election. Nobody cares. Interesting. Don't you think that's interesting? I think that's interesting. Wall Street Silver says Keir Starmer and the Labour Party have won the elections in the UK. Keir Starmer is completely beholden to the Muslim voters and has proposed an Islamic blasphemy law. The UK will be flooded with millions of more Muslims. Many cities will adopt Sharia law at the local level. Do you think Nigel Farage with his 4 seats is going to be able to stop it? I would say no. Neil says, why do we have to take the global lead and not China? Neil is highlighting this. Labour would take the global lead on climate. So UK is aligning with Canada right now. This is Keir Starmer is aligning the United Kingdom with Canada's current policies. Pay attention to what's happening. Lockstep. Melissa says PM Rishi Sunak to announce resignation Friday morning. He's already announced that, so that's happened. This guy's done a not Ryan, but he's sharing a documentary teaser that's almost 4 minutes long. We'll watch the first minute. Ryan says a must watch. Our government's work on behalf of unelected organizations. Yes, the unelected organizations, I think, have a version of hammer and scorecard, and they can place whoever they want in positions of power. Here we go.
There's something we're not being told about our upcoming elections.
Too fast. Yes, there's something they're not being told about the upcoming elections in the UK. That's true, but we'll just slow this down. And
our 2 major parties have been compromised and are undemocratically transitioning us away from shareholder capitalism to another political system. This short story begins with Klaus Schwab, the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum.
We are working closely together with governments from around the world, including all G20 countries.
His exclusive elite members, called stakeholders, include the heads of all G20 countries, from the US and UK to communist countries like China.
What we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, is that we penetrate the cabinets.
After penetrating our cabinets, Schwab and his stakeholders have enacted a 10-year transition to another political system, which Schwab designed.
I pioneered the stakeholder concept.
Called stakeholder capitalism.
Stakeholder capitalism is finally becoming mainstream.
This
doesn't sound evil at all. So, I mean, it's part of the plan. This is what they're planning on doing. Cillian says Angela Rayner has told the BBC British Broadcasting that Labour will build 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years to help house 425,000 asylum seekers who are projected to arrive in Britain under a Labour government. So, right? You understand what's going on? We're all aligned on what's happening here. Isabel says, wow, Tory party sinks to new depths by secretly installing a load of paper candidates to stand for Reform Party and then getting them to cry racism and bigotry at the last minute. We see you. So this is kind of the same strategy that was employed against Maxime Bernier. I watched it firsthand. I know how many people joined. I had it within my own EDA. I had people who were holding positions of like secretary, et cetera, who were working against the party on purpose. And so being in a position and saying, yeah, I'm gonna campaign in good faith and blah, 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 and then a couple of days before the election, like dropping out, puts the party in a bad position and makes the party look bad. But that's the goal of the person who's doing that, right? And I think that it's really interesting how often these strategies are employed. It's happening in the UK, it happens in Canada, and people don't want to see it. They don't want to acknowledge that it's happening. In fact, they blame the party for these things that are happening. And I think that that's interesting because it's I mean, it's incorrect. Really, very, very incorrect. Here is, we're not going to spend much time on this because we have 100 tabs, but it's Chrystia Freeland. And Zoltan says, this is Chrystia Freeland's speech from 6 years ago. It's strange to look back on for so many reasons. First, like Biden, she's aged like a bag of milk, an astonishing decline. Second, she's already grifting Ukraine, very clearly outlining a preferred new globalist order. All of the West currently has leadership installed by hammer and scorecard, by nefarious means, different nefarious means, but all getting the same result of controlled leadership at multiple levels down to the municipality, right? Like the municipalities are governed and have been co-opted by international things like Bloomberg and United Nations for the climate change agenda, right? It's incredible, but there's a lot of money being spent to get that kind of control, fine-grained control. And it's absolutely wild, but this is a plan, and the plan has been long in the making. They didn't wake up in 2020 and say, everybody seems real scared about this whole illness thing. Let's take advantage of that. They orchestrated the illness too in order to scare us, because this was all part of the plan, right? There was no taking advantage. This was part of the plan. So it's pretty wild. Let's talk about free speech in Canada, because the only way this works is if they can censor your speech, censor my speech, destroy my show, destroy people, anybody, not just me, anybody who's speaking the truth or who's not influenced. Well, just look up the, on Google, what's it called? Hammer and scorecard. The hammer and scorecard is absolutely what Google returns will make you think that hammer and scorecard is a right-wing conspiracy theory. And it's not. It is a CIA tool that's being used. It's a computer tool that's being used, but they're just trying to gaslight people into dismissing these dangerous things. It's incredible. So Holly Doan says there are less than 400 members of the Canadian Parliamentary Press Gallery, and far fewer than half of those are reporters. But the federal government has 4,600 communication staff assigned to messaging. 4,600. That's a propaganda army. Blacklock's reporter says, report from Anita Anand's department says 4,600 federal spokespeople must correct Canadians' thinking to preserve the heart of our democracy. Yeah, sounds super democratic, right? Here's a very concerning real tweet from the Waterloo Regional Police, right? Here it is, the gray check mark. And it says, understanding the elements of hate crime can help us combat them. Criminal offense plus hate. How is hate defined? That equals a hate crime. Criminal offense plus hate. Criminal offense minus hate is just a criminal offense. And hate minus a criminal offense is now a hate incident, according to Waterloo Regional Police. Isn't that interesting? With no crime, no criminal offense, there's no anything. There's no incident. But now there is, right? So people are going to be having police show up at their door because of tweets they made or because of things they said on social media. Pretty wild. It's already happening, by the way. CTV News is reporting online harms regulators expected to cost $200 million, says the Parliamentary Budget Office. $200 million to have our internet censored? Oh my gosh, that sounds like a deal. Please, where do I sign up? A bargain basement deal, right? Jeepers creepers. Yes, you can have an army of bureaucrats troll social media to find problematic tweets. That sounds like a great use of taxpayer money. Franco says new online censorship bureaucracy will cost taxpayers $201 million, million with an M. Feds adding 330 new censorship bureaucrats. Nope. Rachel says Trudeau thinks the best use of taxpayer money is to spend over $200 million to set up a three-headed censorship bureau to monitor your speech online. Common sense conservatives disagree. What do you think? Why is Canada becoming an Islamic republic? Seems really weird, right? Aaron says the most nefarious form of censorship is that which is done quietly. The decision by the Trudeau-funded and ironically named Historica Canada to quietly erase this uplifting and accurate heritage minute of Canada's founding because of the leading role played by our first Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, is another selective attempt to cancel Canadian history, all to appease the woke mob and their supporters in Trudeau's cabinet. Fortunately, I downloaded a copy before it could be totally erased. What do you think? Is this short depiction of Canada's foremost moment too offensive for you? Pretty wild stuff, right? Part of our heritage. How dare you remember Canada, right? And the country we used to be based on what we used to be based on, right? Now we're a post-national state. A new caliphate? Who knows? Pierre Poilievre says common sense conservatives will fight back against Trudeau's three-headed censorship monster that wants to control what Canadians see and say online. Signed to shut down Trudeau's censorship monster. Interesting. The whole sign anything, all of this is just a ploy to get your email. Once they get your email, they'll ask you for money, right? So that's pretty wild. Andrew Lawton says Historica Canada used to be the biggest champion of Canadian history. Now it's contributing to the maligning of John A. Macdonald by deleting its Heritage Minute about him to appease unnamed educators who complained. Those educators should be fired. True North is reporting an RCMP warning about citizens' movements threatening democracy. Takes note that women in particular are being drawn to the far right. They're so muscular. Glistening? Sure, he's mean out there, but for me, this is every romance novel that I've ever had the pleasure of suffering through. Ryan says, you read novels, right? Sometimes you're on vacation on a beach and you read what you read, okay? QP is a joke. On the left is how they portrayed the Freedom Convoy protest, and on the right is what they posted today regarding the U of T encampment. This is the same organization also threw every member under the bus when the vax mandates happened. Yeah, QP should be abolished, honestly. QP, all of them should be abolished, actually. They don't serve anybody but themselves at this point in time. On the left, QP Ontario on Halloween January 31st, 2022. They say, as we witness Confederate flags and swastikas, Gadsden flags, and yellow star badges, the mocking of Indigenous people, the use of racist slurs and violent threats, transphobia and homophobia. Let's be clear about this moment. This is white supremacy. So they were saying that about the Freedom Convoy. And QP Ontario says, QP Ontario this is yesterday. QP Ontario challenges the idea that universities are private property. They are part of our commons. They belong to us all. QP Ontario will always defend the right to use civil disobedience and protest to make change and achieve justice. Solidarity with Occupy U of T. So the communists will attack patriots, but they will go and defend and show up in numbers to defend their comrades, right? Communists. So communist unions should be removed. And this is here just because free speech and erasure of history is what communists do. It's happening in Ireland right now too. Tears for Ireland as the 200-year-old fairy tree in Clonmel, sorry, I'm getting that wrong, in Tipperary is about to be felled by workmen against the wishes of millions to make way for a migrant camp. So they've cleared the fairy ring. So in the UK, I've been to the UK and Wales, and I grew up there, and we would drive. There was a specific ferry bridge in Wales that was close to my family's house, and you always have to wave to the ferries and all the rest of it. It's a very kind of ingrained part of the culture there. It's not even woo. It's just kind of is, right? And so it's a really interesting thing that they're trying to destroy that connection too, because it's not, I wouldn't call it particularly strong, but it's something that everybody just knows is there, right? And to remove it, well, I mean, it's more history than just the Irish history being removed there, right? True North. Let's move on to our grab bag of governance, because it's a small grab bag of governance today, though. True North is reporting. This is what I was just talking about with the conservative, sign below to help us fight this, blah, blah, blah. But True North is reporting a week after former BC NDP Premier John Horgan was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, the NDP is facing backlash for asking supporters to wish Horgan well in what appears to be an attempt at amassing email addresses. So, oh yeah, wish him well, and we'll steal your email address and then fundraise off it for the next year and a half. It's pretty incredible, right? Because, I mean, you're always looking for a targeted audience, and you get people. When you work in advertising or when you work in marketing or anything like that, you get people who have figured out a way to find warm leads. Warm leads are leads who might be interested in your thing. And then they'll find ways to get more information from these warm leads. And then they'll sell it to you as a completely ethical thing to do when it's anything but ethical. I've had people say, listen, we can find the physical addresses of people who visited this website. And I was like, can you? And I was in my head thinking, how, but I wanted to know what they could do with it. I mean, aside from the obvious, right? Like, and he said we could send targeted mail to them. And I was like, yikes. I was like, well, I'm not really comfortable with any of that. I'm not comfortable with having your address tied to your email online so advertisers can target warm leads. That seems icky as all get out to me. So I was like, okay. And it's one of those situations where I thought, okay, back out of the room slowly. Don't make eye contact with the crazy person. Right? But I don't know. They seemed really excited about it. I thought that's weird. LCBO's on strike. So LCBO contract talks break off. Workers set to strike at midnight. You know what you should do? Abolish the LCBO. Say, okay, we're just going to sell liquor through grocery stores and the rest. Open up the liquor sales and remove the LCBO as the control board and just open it up completely. And maybe, I don't know, we could have cheaper liquor. And not that cheaper liquor is good. Cheaper liquor is probably bad, but I don't want to pay taxes to these tyrants because holy smokeronies, right? Like, I don't want to pay taxes to LCBO workers who think that they can just go out on strike. This is a manufactured bottleneck. There's no reason that we should, like, Alberta doesn't have the LCBO. Quebec has the SAC, I guess, but like, it's one of those things where we don't need the LCBO. Like, okay, you want to go on strike? See you later. You're all fired. Bye. The LCBO is closed and we're going to sell off the land. Bye. See you later, guys. Bet you didn't expect that. I hope the $15 an hour you're going to get covers the salary we used to pay you. Bye. Right? Like, this is not rocket science, guys. Like, holy smoker. And the unions would lose their minds. But then I'd say, well, yeah, but if there's no work, there's no union, right? So see you later. I don't have anything to say to you. You don't represent anybody. Bye. Because I fired them all. Bye. Get out. Bye. Get out. Security, get them out of here. Bye. See ya. Holly Doan says, Cabinet is reviewing $5 million in funding for the Black Business and Professional Association whose directors are accused of financial misconduct. It's money laundering, and it seems like inside cronyism. And if we're giving money to black people, well, see the beginning of the show. Like, I don't care if you're Jewish or black or, crimson, doesn't matter what you are or who you are. What matters is the content of your character. And if it seems like you're trying to just take money for ventilators that aren't even really ventilators or aren't certified or anything like that, it seems like you're just stealing, right? It's a sophisticated grift. It's a sophisticated theft, but theft nonetheless. Moving on, Leslyn Lewis is talking about Davos. She says the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, doesn't want you to see who she meets with in Davos or how much her trip to meet with WEF elites cost Canadians. See for yourself, the response I received. Just another example of secrecy from a government that promises to be the most transparent in Canadian history. Well, they haven't been that in a while. And I mean, it's obviously just any kind of information that you want gets a liberal dodge. You don't get to talk about what you want to talk about. They talk about what they want to talk about. Michael Cooper says, Auditor General reveals that Minister Champagne's department knew that the Green Slush Fund board funneled millions to their companies. Champagne claimed that he didn't know. He has zero credibility. This Trudeau government was complicit in the corruption. I'd be quarterbacking the corruption? Yes. Here we go.
I want to ask you about the $38 million in unlawful COVID payments that the board approved, millions of which went into their own companies. They didn't recuse themselves. The chair even moved the two motions in which her company was enriched by several $100,000 as a result of those COVID relief payments. The Auditor General's report is very clear that your department was aware at the time that the board approved those payments. Can you explain why your department turned a blind eye to what amounted to a black and white violation of the contribution agreement with respect to $38 million that went out the door?
I think, Mr. Chair, I've already spoken to this issue before. I would simply note that, the reason why this organization is being moved to the NRC
You knew about it. You knew about it.
It's because it's very...
You knew about it, right, sir? You knew about the $38 million that went out the door unlawfully?
I think, Mr. Chair, I feel like I've already spoken to this issue.
I'm asking you.
I'm happy to provide some elaboration.
Mr. Cooper, your time just ended, so why don't I'll give Mr. Kennedy time to respond. You have the floor, sir.
I would simply note, and I think there's been extensive testimony today, that the very design of this organization, which by statute has to have members on the board with deep experience in the clean tech industry, the fact that it is arm's length and is not subject to a lot of the usual checks and balances. That called for additional oversight and scrutiny. We agree.
Sounds like you're washing your hands clean of any accountability. Canadian taxpayers deserve so much better.
So there you go. There's always, well, you know, this and that, and they don't ever want to take ownership for the failures. It seems like the failures are part of the plan. Speaking of failures being part of the plan, CTV News is reporting more than 5,500 heat pumps recalled in Canada due to potential risk of excessive heat exposure. So that's, I mean, that's not good, right? Like, that's not a good thing. Real Andy Lee. Oh, hold on. I've got to move this. Safe supply is being rerouted to criminals and criminal networks, and they're being paid and getting recruiting using the safe supply. And Brian says the police in London, Ontario have become political tools, choosing not to inform the public about the explosion of diverted opiates pills because they did not want to be on what they saw as the wrong side of the political argument. So that's interesting, right? It's the same thing in BC until they couldn't deny it anymore. They denied everything about legal government taxpayer bought drugs ending up in criminal hands. They denied it until they couldn't anymore. And that's just wrong. Because, I mean, in Guelph, they said, we're going to save lives by creating this safe supply because people are dying of overdoses because of dangerous laced drugs with poison. And everybody kind of said drugs are poison, right? And they said, yeah, but like other poison. And so they brought in this safe supply. And you know what happened? Overdose deaths doubled, more than doubled in Guelph. And I use this statistic all the time. It was a newspaper article that, you know, overdose deaths doubled in Guelph. I can still find it. But it's one of those things where usually if your goal was to reduce deaths and then you implement a program and it does the opposite, it increases deaths, you stop that program, right? Like you're like, we were trying to save money, but what happened is we spent twice the money that we were intending to spend. And so we just kept doing that. Like, no, you stopped doing that and you changed the thing because you were trying to save money, but instead you doubled the money you're spending. You can't, that's not sustainable. That's crazy town. What are you trying to do? Kill people? Oh, right. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.